They assumed they'd inherit my beach house, so I sold it and donated the money to save the whales. Picture this, my son Bradley standing on the front porch of what used to be my beautiful oceanfront cottage, holding a set of keys that no longer fit the locks, while a moving truck pulls away with the last of his belongings. The look of absolute bewilderment on his 45-year-old face was worth every penny I donated to the Marine Conservation Society. But let me back up and tell you exactly how we got to that glorious moment. Hello everyone. And welcome back to Granny's Tales. My name is Margaret Maggie Sutherland. I'm 78 years old, and I've lived by the ocean for more than half my life. I've always believed that family comes first, that generosity breeds gratitude, and that the sound of waves can heal just about any heartache. For 35 years, I opened my heart, my home, and my wallet to my children and grandchildren, thinking that love and respect were a two-way street. Boy, was I in for a rude awakening. If you've ever been treated like a walking ATM by your own flesh and blood, or if you believe that respect isn't something that expires when you hit retirement age, then buckle up for this story. And if you think this old gal was done fighting for herself, well, let's just say the ocean taught me a thing or two about the power of persistent waves wearing down even the strongest rocks. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're ready to see some family justice served up colder than a Maine winter. And subscribe to Granny's Tales for more stories where experience trumps entitlement every single time. Let me paint you a picture of the woman I used to be, or maybe the woman I thought I had to be. When my late husband Robert passed away 15 years ago, he left me well provided for. The insurance money, combined with his pension and our savings, meant I could live comfortably. But more than that, I had our crown jewel, a 3-bedroom cottage right on Pemaquid Beach in Maine, worth about $800,000 by today's market. That cottage wasn't just a house, it was where Robert and I spent our honeymoon, where we raised our 2 children, Bradley and Susan, where we hosted countless family barbecues and Christmas mornings. Every weathered shingle and sun-bleached deck board held a memory. After Robert died, that cottage became my lifeline to family. Bradley, my oldest, was going through his second divorce and needed a place to get back on his feet, so I let him and his teenage son Tyler move in, just temporarily, Mom, he said, just until I figure things out. That was 5 years ago. Susan, my daughter, lived in California with her husband Derek and their twin girls, Emma and Chloe. Every summer, they'd descend on the cottage for 6 weeks. Not just a vacation, they'd treat it like their personal resort. Derek would invite his business colleagues for networking dinners that I'd end up cooking for, while Susan would reorganize my kitchen and redecorate my living room to make it more Instagram-worthy. But I told myself this was what family did. I was being useful. I was being needed. The financial support started small. Bradley's car repair here. Susan's kids' private school tuition there. Tyler needed a laptop for college, then spending money. Then help with his apartment deposit. Over the years, I'd estimate I gave them close to $150,000 in various loans that never seemed to get paid back. I covered property taxes, maintenance, utilities, groceries, treating them like beloved guests in what I slowly realized they'd started treating as their inherited property. Bradley even had mail delivered there. Derek used my address for his business correspondence. The twins told their friends it was Grandma's house, where we live in the summer, and gradually I almost didn't notice. The thank yous stopped coming. The visits became more like inspections. My cooking wasn't quite right. My decorating was dated. My stories were repetitive. My concerns about their spending were controlling. I became a walking wallet with an attached beach house, and somewhere along the way, I forgot I was also a woman with her own dreams, her own needs, and her own damn voice. The shift from taking me for granted to outright disrespect happened so gradually that I can't pinpoint exactly when it started. Maybe it was when Bradley stopped asking if he could have friends over and started just announcing it. Maybe it was when Susan began referring to our cottage in conversations with her friends as if she'd paid for even one shingle. But I started noticing things. How conversations would stop when I entered a room, how they'd exchange glances when I mentioned wanting to travel or take up watercolor painting again. How Tyler would roll his eyes when I'd mention house rules, and Bradley would say, "Come on, Mom, don't be so uptight." The real wake-up call came during last year's Christmas gathering. I'd spent 3 days cooking, decorating, and preparing for everyone's arrival. I was exhausted but happy until I overheard Susan on the phone with her friend Linda. "Oh, we're stuck at Mom's place again," she was saying, not knowing I was in the next room folding the towels she'd used and left on the bathroom floor. The Wi-Fi is terrible. The guest room mattress is like sleeping on rocks. And she keeps trying to make us play board games like we're 12. Derek's already looking at rental properties for next summer. We just need to wait until, well, until we inherit this place and can renovate it properly. My hand stilled on the towels. Until they inherit it, I was 77 years old and in perfect health. I walked 3 miles on the beach every morning and could still outcook any of them with one hand tied behind my back. That evening at dinner, the conversation somehow turned to estate planning. Bradley, emboldened by wine, said, "Mom, you really should think about putting the cottage in our names now, for tax purposes. Derek knows a guy who specializes in this stuff." "It would save everyone a lot of hassle later," Susan chimed in, not even looking up from her phone. Tyler, my grandson who I'd helped put through college, laughed. "Grandma, you're not exactly using this place to its full potential anyway. We could turn it into something really special." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "What do you mean?" "Not using it to its full potential?" "Well," Bradley said, with the condescending tone he'd use on a child, "you just sit here. Derek's been saying we could probably rent it out for $5,000 a week during peak season. Make it actually profitable." Derek nodded enthusiastically. "The property management company I know could handle everything. You could move into a nice senior community. Maybe one of those places with activities and medical staff nearby. Much more practical." The table went quiet. Everyone was looking at me expectantly, as if they just offered me the deal of a lifetime instead of suggesting I exile myself from my own home so they could profit from it. "I see," I said quietly, "and what if I'm not ready to move into a senior community?" Susan reached over and patted my hand like I was a confused child. "Mom, we're just thinking about your safety. What if something happened to you out here? What if you fell? We worry about you being so isolated." But I heard what she wasn't saying. What if something happened to you, and we couldn't get control of the property quickly enough? That night, I lay in my bed, in the house I'd lived in for over 30 years, and listened to them in the living room planning renovations, new kitchen, updated bathrooms, maybe a hot tub on the deck. They talked about my cottage like it was already theirs, with the casual certainty of people who'd never worked a day for what they were planning to inherit. The final insult came 3 months later. In March, I'd been feeling under the weather. Just a spring cold, but at my age, Bradley and Susan went into full concerned children mode. Suddenly, they were calling every day, dropping by constantly, bringing me soup and tissues and a lot of worried looks. I should have been touched. Instead, something felt off. The truth revealed itself when I came home early from my doctor's appointment. Just a routine checkup where I'd gotten a clean bill of health, and found Bradley, Susan, and Derek sitting at my kitchen table with a man I didn't recognize. Papers were spread across the table, and everyone looked up with guilty expressions when I walked in. Mom Bradley jumped up. "You're back early. How did the appointment go?" But I was staring at the papers. Even upside down, I could see the letterhead, Elder Care Solutions and Cognitive Assessment Forms. "What is this?" I asked quietly. The stranger stood up, extending his hand. "Mrs. Sutherland. I'm Jim Morrison from Elder Care Solutions. Your children asked me to come by and discuss some options for what?" Susan stood up. Her face flushed. "Mom, we've been worried about you. You've been so tired lately. And yesterday you forgot what day it was, and I had a cold," I said, my voice rising. "I was sick. People forget things when they're sick." Bradley moved toward me with that same patronizing expression. "Mom, we just want what's best for you. Jim here specializes in helping families transition elderly relatives into appropriate care setting." Elderly relatives, I repeated. "I'm standing in my own kitchen, having just gotten a clean bill of health from my doctor, and you're discussing transitioning me into a care setting." Derek, who'd been silent until now, cleared his throat. "Maggie, we're not trying to upset you, but you have to admit, managing this big house is getting to be too much, and with your episodes lately." "What episodes? You've been repeating stories," Susan said gently, "and you forgot Emma's birthday last month." I stared at her. "Emma's birthday is next month, in April." The room went silent. Susan's face went white, and I continued, my voice getting stronger. "The only stories I repeat are the ones about when you kids were young and actually appreciated what you had. Apparently, those need repeating." Jim Morrison looked uncomfortable. "Perhaps I should go and let you discuss this as a family." "Oh no," I said, moving to stand behind my own chair. "Let's discuss this right now, with everyone here. You are all clearly comfortable making decisions about my life without me, so let's have it out in the open." I looked at Bradley. "How long have you been planning this?" "Mom, it's not like that." "How long?" Derek answered. "We've been concerned for a while, and frankly, Maggie, maintaining this property is expensive. The taxes alone are over $15,000 a year, and the insurance, the upkeep. It's a lot for someone on a fixed income." "A fixed income?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean the fixed income that's been paying for your son's college, your wife's shopping sprees, and your business dinners for the past 5 years?" Susan's voice turned sharp. "We never asked you to do those things. No, you just expected them. And now you expect me to conveniently disappear into some care facility so you can swoop in and turn my home into your personal investment property." The silence stretched out. Finally, Bradley sighed. "Mom, you're being dramatic. We're trying to help you by having me declared incompetent." "Not incompetent," Jim Morrison interjected. "Just in need of assistance with major life decisions." I looked around the table at these people, my children, my son-in-law, this stranger they'd brought into my home to help them steal my life from me. And I realized that this wasn't a recent development. This was the culmination of years of slowly eroding my authority, my autonomy, my right to exist as anything other than their financial and residential benefactor. "Get out," I said quietly. "Mom," Susan started. "Get out," I roared, and my voice filled the cottage the way it used to when these same children were small and had done something dangerous. "All of you, out of my house." They gathered their papers, and their guilt and their plans for my life, and they left. But as they filed out, I heard Derek mutter to Susan, "She's obviously more far gone than we thought. We might need to move faster than planned." That night, I sat on my deck watching the waves crash against the rocks below, and I made a decision. If they wanted to treat me like I was already dead, then maybe it was time for the old Maggie to die, and maybe it was time for them to find out what the new Maggie was capable of. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my rocking chair, wrapped in the quilt my mother had made me, watching the lighthouse beam sweep across the water every 30 seconds for 78 years. That lighthouse had warned ships away from the dangerous rocks. Maybe it was time I started sending some warning signals of my own. By morning, I'd made my decision. But I'm not a foolish woman, and I wasn't about to act on emotion alone. If my children wanted to play hardball, they were about to discover that their elderly, confused mother had picked up a few tricks in nearly 8 decades on this earth. My first call was to Patricia Murphy, my lawyer for the past 20 years. Patricia had handled Robert's estate, our wills, and various property matters. She was sharp, discreet, and had no patience for nonsense. "Maggie," she said when I explained the situation, "I'm going to be direct with you. What they attempted to do yesterday could constitute elder abuse. Depending on how far they were willing to take it, do you want me to pursue that angle? Not yet," I said, "but I want to know my options. All of them, fair enough. First question, is the cottage in your name alone?" "Yes, Robert and I owned it jointly, but when he died, it transferred to me completely." "Good." Second question, do you have any legal documents giving Bradley or Susan power of attorney or any authority? Why over your finances or medical decisions? None. Excellent. Third question, what do you want to do? I was quiet for a moment, watching Tyler, my own grandson, through the window as he loaded his surfboard onto the car I'd bought him. He was meeting friends at the beach. He'd live here for free all summer, then go back to college in the fall on the education fund I'd established for him. "I want them to understand that I'm not dead yet," I said finally, "and I want them to learn what it feels like to have the rug pulled out from underneath them." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Maggie, I've known you for 20 years. You've always been generous to a fault with your family. Are you sure about this, Patricia?" "Yesterday, my own children brought a stranger into my home to have me declared incompetent so they could steal my property. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." "All right then, let's talk about your options." Over the next 2 weeks, Patricia and I met 3 times. We reviewed my will, which currently left everything to Bradley and Susan in equal shares, my financial accounts, my property deeds, and my legal rights. More importantly, we crafted a plan. I also made some phone calls to my doctor, who provided me with a written statement of my mental and physical competency, to my financial advisor, who helped me understand exactly what my assets were worth and how to move them if necessary, to 3 different real estate agents, who gave me current market assessments on the cottage, but most importantly, I made a call to the Marine Conservation Society, a charity I'd supported quietly for years. I'd always loved whales. Robert and I used to take whale-watching trips every summer. When he died, I'd made a small donation in his memory. Over the years, I'd given them maybe $500 annually. "Mrs. Sutherland," said Dr. Rebecca Chen, their development director, "we're so honored by your continued support. How can we help you today?" Dr. Chen, hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to make a significant donation to support whale conservation, what kind of impact could that money have? Well, that would depend on the size of the donation, of course, but we're always looking for funding for our research vessel, our marine sanctuary expansion, and our educational programs. What would you consider a significant donation? Anything over $50,000 would be transformational for our programs. With $100,000, we could fund a full research expedition. With more than that, she paused. "Mrs. Sutherland, may I ask what range you're considering?" "Let's say around $800,000. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long I thought we'd been disconnected. "Mrs. Sutherland," Dr. Chen said finally, "with that kind of donation, we could establish a permanent research station, fund multiple expeditions, and create an endowment that would support whale conservation in perpetuity. We could name it in Honor of anyone you'd like to memorialize, the Robert Sutherland Memorial Fund for Marine Conservation, I said immediately. That has a nice ring to it, don't you think, by the end of March. All my pieces were in place. I'd been careful to act normally around Bradley and Tyler, who were still living in the cottage. I cooked dinner, did laundry, and kept up my usual routines when Susan called to check on me. I was pleasant but distant when Derek sent me articles about senior living options. I thanked him politely and said I'd think about it. Let them think their little intervention had scared me into submission. Let them think the old woman was considering their generous offer to steal her life from her. Meanwhile, I was busy. I hired a moving company to put my personal belongings in storage. I arranged for a month-long stay at a beautiful bed and breakfast in Bar Harbor while I looked for a smaller place of my own. I updated my will, removing Bradley and Susan as beneficiaries and leaving everything to a trust that would fund the Robert Sutherland Memorial Fund in perpetuity, and I accepted the offer from the real estate agent. The cottage would sell for $825,000, more than enough to set up the endowment and leave me financially secure for the rest of my days. The closing was set for April 15th. The buyers were a lovely young couple from Boston who promised to love the cottage as much as Robert and I had. They planned to keep it as a family home, not turn it into a rental property. That felt right. I decided to wait until the last possible moment to tell my family. Let them get comfortable. Let them make their plans. Let them assume the old woman had rolled over and accepted their vision of her future. On April 14th, the day before closing, I cooked one last big family dinner. I told Bradley that I wanted to have everyone together to discuss the future. Susan and Derek drove up from Boston, where they'd been visiting friends. Tyler invited his girlfriend because, why not have an audience? The table was set with my good china, the set that would have been Susan's someday. I'd made pot roast, Bradley's favorite, and apple pie from scratch. The kind of meal that takes all day to prepare and shows exactly how much you care about the people you're feeding. We made small talk through dinner. Derek complimented the food. Susan talked about the twins' school play. Tyler mentioned his summer internship. Bradley asked if I'd given any more thought to the transition they discussed. Actually, I said, serving the pie, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about. I've made some decisions about my future. They all perked up, exchanging glances. Here it was, the old woman's surrender. I've decided you were right, I continued. This cottage is too much for me to handle alone. The maintenance, the isolation, the financial burden. It's time for a change. Susan reached over and squeezed my hand. Oh, Mom, I'm so glad you're being practical about this. I've also decided that you were right about making better use of the property. It's time for this cottage to serve a greater purpose than just housing one old woman. Bradley smiled. Mom, you're going to love the retirement community we looked at, and don't worry about the cottage. We'll take care of everything. That's very thoughtful, I said. But it won't be necessary. Derek looked confused. What do you mean? I stood up and walked to the sideboard where I'd placed a folder. I mean that I've already taken care of everything. The cottage sold yesterday. The closing is tomorrow morning. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that dining room. Tyler spoke first. Grandma, what do you mean sold? I mean I accepted an offer from a lovely young couple who will close on the property tomorrow at 10 a.m. They're paying $825,000, which is above asking price. Susan's face went white. Mom, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. In fact, I'm more serious than I've been about anything in years. Bradley's voice was strained. Mom, where are we supposed to live? Tyler and I live here. Our mail comes here. This is our home. No, I said calmly, this is my home, and as of tomorrow, it will be the home of Jack and Sarah Mitchell, who are both doctors and plan to raise their children here. Just like Robert and I did, Derek leaned forward. Maggie, this is insane. You can't just sell a property without consulting the family. There are legal considerations, tax implications, all of which I discussed with my lawyer, my financial advisor, and my accountant. Everything is perfectly legal and above board. Susan's voice was rising. What about us? What about the twins? They love this place. The twins are welcome to visit me in my new home, wherever that may be. If they can manage to treat me with respect, your new home. Bradley looked confused. I thought you were moving into that senior community. I smiled. Did I say that? I don't recall saying that. I said I was making changes. I never said I was. Moving into a facility. Tyler's girlfriend, who'd been quietly eating pie this whole time, raised her hand tentatively. Mrs. Sutherland. What's going to happen to the money from selling the house, finally? Someone had asked the right question. I'm so glad you asked, dear. The money is going to the Marine Conservation Society to establish the Robert Sutherland Memorial Fund for Marine Conservation. It will fund whale research in perpetuity. The explosion was immediate and spectacular. The whales, Susan shrieked. You're giving our inheritance to the whales, $800,000 to fish. Derek looked like he might faint. Grandma, you've lost your mind, Tyler said flatly. But it was Bradley's reaction that satisfied me the most. He just stared at me with the dawning realization that his confused, elderly mother had just outmaneuvered him completely. You planned this, he said slowly. You've been planning this since we had Jim Morrison over. Actually, I said, sitting back down and cutting myself another piece of pie. I've been planning this since I overheard Susan telling Linda that she was stuck here and couldn't wait to inherit the place so she could renovate it properly. Susan's mouth fell open. You heard that. I hear a lot of things. I see a lot of things. Funny how people assume that being elderly means being deaf and blind. Derek stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous, Maggie. You can't be serious about this whale thing. You're obviously not thinking clearly. We can contest this. We can prove you're not competent to make these kinds of decisions. I looked at him calmly. You mean like you tried to do last month? Feel free to try again. I have a written statement from my doctor confirming my mental and physical competency. I have detailed financial records showing that I've been managing my own affairs successfully for 15 years since Robert died, and I have witnesses to your attempt to have me declared incompetent so you could steal my property. Patricia had been thorough in preparing me for this moment. But you're our mother, Susan said, and for the first time, she sounded like she might cry. This is our family home. Yes, I am your mother, and this was our family home. But somewhere along the way, you stopped treating me like your mother and started treating me like an obstacle to your inheritance. You stopped treating this like a family home and started treating it like your personal property. Bradley slammed his hand on the table. So this is punishment. You're punishing us. No. I said quietly, this is self-respect. I'm teaching you the difference between a gift and an entitlement. I'm teaching you that love and respect can't be one-sided. And I'm teaching you that this old woman isn't dead yet. Tyler looked around the table desperately. But Grandma, where are we supposed to go? I'm supposed to start my internship next month. I can't afford rent in Portland. Tyler, you're 22 years old. You're about to graduate from college that I paid for. Your father is 45 years old with a job and a hands. I have complete faith that you'll figure it out. But what about our relationship? Susan asked. What about family? I stood up and began clearing the dishes. What about it, Susan? You're welcome to have a relationship with me anytime you'd like. You can call me, visit me, invite me to the Twins school plays. You can treat me like your mother instead of your bank account. You can ask me how I'm doing instead of telling me what I should be doing. I paused in my dish clearing and looked around the table. But you can do all of that without assuming that loving you means I have to give up my own life, my own choices, and my own right to decide what happens to the things I've worked for. Derek was shaking his head. This is unbelievable. You're really going to choose Wales over your own family? I'm not choosing Wales over family, I said. I'm choosing self-respect over being taken for granted. The Wales are just a bonus. The moving trucks came the next morning, right on schedule. I'd paid extra to have everything packed and loaded while I was at the closing, so I wouldn't have to watch Bradley and Tyler scramble to get their belongings out of what they'd assumed would always be their free housing. By the time I returned from signing the papers that transferred my cottage to the lovely Mitchell family, the house was empty except for the furniture I'd sold with the property. Bradley's car was gone. Tyler's surfboard was gone. The kitchen was clean, and there was a note on the counter in Bradley's handwriting. Mom, I hope you're happy with what you've done. Call us when you come to your senses. I folded the note carefully and put it in my purse. Then I walked out onto the deck one last time and watched the waves roll in below the cottage that had been my home for 35 years. I felt lighter for the first time in years. I felt like I could breathe properly. Dr. Rebecca Chen from the Marine Conservation Society met me at the cottage that afternoon to accept the ceremonial check. The real money transfer would happen electronically, but she wanted to mark the moment with photos for their newsletter. Mrs. Sutherland, she said, looking around at the empty rooms. Are you sure about this? This is a significant sacrifice you're making. Dr. Chen, I said, the only sacrifice I made was spending 5 years of my life being treated like a walking wallet instead of a human being. This feels like freedom, she smiled. Well, I can promise you that Robert's Memorial Fund will do incredible things for marine conservation. We're already planning our first expedition. After she left, I locked up the cottage and drove to my bed and breakfast in Bar Harbor. I'd booked a room with an ocean view, and I spent my first night of freedom sitting on the balcony, reading a book I'd bought months ago but never had time to finish. The phone calls started the next day. Susan called first, crying, Mom, I'm so sorry. I never meant for things to go this far. Can we please talk about this? Of course we can talk, I said. How are the twins? How's school going? No, Mom, I mean talk about the cottage, about the money, about undoing this. Susan, there's nothing to undo. The cottage is sold. The money is donated. It's done. But Mom, but nothing. Now, do you want to talk to me about your life, your children, your thoughts and feelings? Or do you want to talk to me about money and property that's no longer mine to discuss? She hung up. Bradley called that evening. He was furious. Mom, I've talked to 3 lawyers today. They all say that what you did was legal, but that doesn't mean it was right. You talked to 3 lawyers in one day, I asked. That must have been expensive. I hope you didn't take Tyler's college fund to pay for it. This isn't funny, Mom. Tyler and I are living in a motel. I'm sorry to hear that. There are some nice apartments in Portland, and I believe you have a good job. You'll figure it out. We can't afford first month, last month, and security deposit on an apartment. Mom, we need help. Bradley, for 5 years you lived in my house rent-free. If you didn't save any money during that time, that's not my emergency to solve. So that's it. You're just going to abandon us. I'm not abandoning you. I'm treating you like the adult you are. You're 45 years old. Bradley, it's time. He hung up too. But Tyler surprised me. He called 3 days later, and he sounded different. Older, maybe grandma. I wanted to apologize. Oh, I've been thinking about what you said, about the difference between gifts and entitlements. I think I've been treating you badly for a long time. I felt my heart soften just a little. Tell me what you mean. I mean, I've been living in your house, driving a car you bought me, going to college on money you gave me, and I never once asked you what you wanted. I never asked if you were lonely, or if you needed anything, or if you had dreams you wanted to pursue. I just took everything for granted. And now I'm working 3 jobs to pay for a crappy apartment I share with 2 roommates. And I'm scared about how I'm going to pay for my last semester of college, and I'm realizing that you made my life really easy for a really long time. I was quiet for a moment. Tyler. I loved making your life easier. That's what grandmothers do, but I needed to know that you saw me as a person, not just as a resource. I just see you as a person. Grandma, I see you now, and I'm really sorry it took losing everything to figure that out. We talked for an hour about his classes, his girlfriend, his fears about the future, about my new life, my plans to travel, my excitement about the Whale Research Fund. It was the first real conversation we'd had in years. At the end of the call, he asked, Grandma, do you think, could I maybe visit you sometime? Not because I need anything, just because I miss talking to you. Tyler, I said, I would love that more than anything. 3 months later, I was settled into a beautiful 1-bedroom condo in Camden, Maine, with a view of the harbour and a short walk to the library, the grocery store, and 3 different coffee shops. I joined a book club, started taking watercolour classes, and made friends with my neighbours. Susan and Derek sent me a card on my birthday. Just a card, no phone call. Bradley sent nothing. But Tyler visited twice, and the second time, he brought his girlfriend Emma to meet me properly. She's a lovely girl studying marine biology, and when I told her about the Whale Research Fund, her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Mrs. Sutherland, she said, you've funded the kind of research I dream of doing someday. Then maybe someday you'll work on one of the Robert Sutherland Memorial expeditions, I told her. Wouldn't that be something? Dr. Chen sends me monthly updates on the fund's activities. They've already launched 2 research expeditions and are planning a 3rd. They're tracking humpback whale populations, studying the effects of climate change on migration patterns, and working with local communities to protect marine habitats. Every time I get one of those updates, I think about Bradley and Susan and Derek, and I smile. They thought they were entitled to $825,000 because they were related to me. Instead, that money is going to protect magnificent creatures and preserve the oceans for future generations. They got exactly what they deserved. Nothing. But more importantly, I got exactly what I deserved: respect, autonomy, and the satisfaction of knowing that my life's work will continue long after I'm gone. And that's how this old grandma taught her family that love isn't the same as entitlement. And that respect isn't optional just because someone is elderly. Sometimes the best thing you can do for people who take you for granted is to show them what life looks like without your generosity. What do you think? Was I too harsh? Or did they get exactly what they deserved? Have you ever had to teach entitled family members a lesson about respect? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And remember, it's never too late to stand up for yourself. If you enjoyed watching this family learn the hard way that grandma's not dead yet, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to Granny's Tales for more stories where wisdom wins over entitlement. Hit that notification bell so you'll be the first to know when I share another tale of grandmotherly justice. And remember, my dear viewers, you're never too old to reinvent your life. Never too old to demand respect, and never too old to choose your own adventure. The ocean taught me that even the gentlest waves can reshape the hardest rocks, if they're persistent enough. Don't let anyone convince you that getting older means getting smaller. Sometimes it means getting smarter, getting stronger, and getting very, very strategic. Until next time, this is Maggie Sutherland reminding you that the best revenge is living well, and sometimes Saving the whales. Thanks for listening, and remember, don't underestimate Grandma.